Time to get educated on your Second Amendment rights. Welcome to 2 full hours of Gun Owners Radio. Your hosts, Dave Stahl, Joe Drammissi, and Michael Schwartz, will teach you about firearms, self-defense, and the laws that affect your rights to keep and bear arms. Visit gunownersradio.com with questions to learn how to become a sponsor of Gun Owners Radio and get involved. Together, we will win. Now here's your hosts, Dave Stahl, Joe Drammissi, and Michael Schwartz on The Answer San Diego.
All right, folks, welcome to Gun Owners Radio, FM 96.1, AM 1170.
The Answer.
All right, Uvalde, Buffalo, and New York have proven again that gun laws don't work. Gun control laws just make it harder for law-abiding citizens to protect themselves. Here's an idea. Instead of making it harder for bad guys to get guns, which doesn't work, what if we try making it easier for good guys to get guns? How do we do that? You join a Second Amendment activist group like San Diego County Gun Owners. SDCGO makes it activism easy. Working together, we're getting more pro-gun officials elected. Join today. San Diego County Gun Owner Radio.com, San Diego County Gun Owners Radio, or gunowners.com. Hey, join today.
Yeah, sdcgo.org as well. And go there and check out Gun Prom. Gun Prom is Saturday, so it's 6 days away. It's a week from yesterday. And you're still tickets available, but very, very few. So if you want to go, you got to go buy right now. Gunprom.com. Still have a couple tickets. I think you can even buy a table this late. But hurry up, hurry up. Yeah, it's go time. So we're gonna have over 700 people. Over 700 people on Saturday night are gonna join us. Action Jackson, you're gonna be there, aren't you, bud?
Yep.
You're gonna be there. You got your own table.
Yeah.
You must have sold a lot of lemonade.
You're gonna eat all by yourself?
No.
No one's coming. You're just you got your own table.
You should bring some guests.
Yeah, you should be nice. Come on.
At least bring mom and dad.
Make sure you charge them. Don't let them come for free.
So go to gunprom.com, Gunprom. Easier said than done. Gunprom.com. So a little bit of breaking news. I didn't prepare Brendan. Let me try one more time. A little bit of breaking news.
He's not there.
Oh, well. So the looks like there's a quote-unquote bipartisan bill moving through the Senate, probably go to the House before too long. Details are not as detailed as they should be, but one thing that's kind of clear. Now, there's some bad and some good.
It's not as bad as it could have been.
That's the good, and the good is that's the good. It's not as bad as it could have been. Did you take a look at it at all, Joe?
Yeah.
What's one of the positives that stuck out to me is there's no gun ban.
Right.
So yeah, I thought so too. I was kind of in fact, I wasn't totally against, most anything in that bill. Were you?
Well, there's a lot of. What did you think, Joe?
Well, it's philosophically, it's a bad thing. It's like John Cornyn's pretty good, I think, and he was the Republican part of the bipartisan thing.
Yeah.
This could be a play just because we were going to lose something. Americans were going to lose and suffer over this. We were going to lose some rights. And this could be an uncharacteristically smart Republican move to, deflate some of this emotion and stuff. And, here, we'll pass this. Because they talked about, I think the worst thing I saw was money for the states to encourage red flag laws.
Right.
Which that, again, philosophically is disgraceful. Republicans of any kind should not be supporting that. And
it was vague.
Well, and again, that might have been intentional. But if you're going to support that, I mean, all right, if you wanted to say, okay, well, we need to talk about red flag laws, I would say, okay, if you want to really talk, because that's the thing, and I talk about this in my article, we never really talk. It's never really a discussion. It's always Democrats demand this, Republicans roll over for that. Always. That's always how it goes.
That's the old joke is if Democrats put out a bill to burn down the White House, Republicans would demand that we phase it in over 3 years.
Yeah, there you go. Heads I win, tails you lose. It's always like that. But, if you're going to talk about red flag laws, okay, let's make it so that it's extremely difficult to abuse these things, because right now it's very easy to abuse these things. And if you guess wrong, then there should be a price to pay on the government side, on the state side. If you wrongly accuse somebody, wrongly seize their guns, then when that gets straightened out, that stuff comes back immediately.
Yeah,
like
they
that
get
day.
and they get like $1 million settlement.
Well, no, and there should
know?
be some incentive for them to do it right. And
Don't
right
they
now,
already
there's no
have that?
incentive.
If you're
No.
No, you get
It's
it back
really abuse.
eventually.
Now,
They
here's the
come
thing.
back, but
And I was interviewed on Channel 8 this morning, and she did a really good job. I forget the reporter's name. I wish I remember, because she actually did a really good job. So the red flag laws, it's actually a very broad term, but the only red flag law that they've created are gun violence restraining orders. So people are using red flag laws and gun violence restraining orders kind of interchangeably, but a gun violence restraining order is a type of red flag law. So it made me kind of wonder, is there a red flag law that we would support, that gun owners would be okay with? Because right now, I got to tell you, when the gun violence restraining orders came out, we sat down with an open mind and said, all right, explain to us, what's going on here, and quickly, saw the enormous problems with gun violence restraining orders. But is there a type of red flag law that we would support or be okay with?
well, at least consider anyway. And for me personally, I might consider something if there's really strong safeguards in there that put the burden on the state or whoever's taking this action, so that you make it almost impossible to abuse or extremely difficult to abuse. And if it gets abused, there should be a penalty for it.
Yeah.
The way it is now, it's not that way at all.
And you know what sucks? Right now, somebody's listening to this and going, Gun Owners Radio likes red flag laws. That's not what we're saying. And that goes back to what you were saying just a minute ago, Joe, is there's not a discussion. Mm-hmm. There's just, and I got to tell you, I don't want to budge an inch. But I do, as far as gun rights, I don't want to budge 1 inch, not 1 inch. There's nothing wrong with my Second Amendment. But I do want to figure out what we can do to, severely, inhibit the ability for a criminal to be destructive. And
that's a very good statement you made. There's absolutely nothing wrong with my Second Amendment, and I think that needs to be the mantra.
Totally,
Seriously.
And one of the other things that I think we've done successfully, or we're starting to do a little bit better, is, so the anti-gun folks came out and said, we're going to ban guns. Woohoo, big opportunity for us to ban guns like we've always wanted to. And typically what people do is a clip and a magazine are not the same thing. We've done a better job of saying, hey, you know what? Mm-hmm. The big money lobbyists that are, the anti-gun big money lobbyists are preventing real change from happening in, like, for example, the mental health industry, and they need to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
That this political agenda of trying to ban guns is preventing real and meaningful change, like, for example, security in schools. And that was another positive piece, I thought,
That's
Joe.
what I liked.
Is
hardening the schools.
Yeah.
Well, again, but that's not if you want to really do something, the fastest, cheapest, most effective thing you could do right now is get rid of these stupid no-gun or gun-free zones at schools.
Yep.
That's the quickest, cheapest, easiest, most effective thing they could do right now.
Right.
And then we can talk about that. Like I said, I would like to see the Republicans sit down and say, okay, fine, let's talk. Let's start off with, how would lifting these gun-free zones look? What's that look like?
So just to recap real quick, and then we're going to go to Jonathan Peck, who was one of the candidates for sheriff, and I really can't wait to interview him. But real quick, positive that there's no gun ban in this bill, which is a victory. Negative is they're talking about red flag laws, but positive, they didn't really go into details. That could be a positive or a negative, though. Positive, they're talking about school security. Positive, they're talking about fixing the mental health industry. Not too bad. There was a negative. There was something about waiting periods and under 21, and
Well, you couldn't buy a long rifle.
It was an enhanced background.
check for
from 21 to 18.
So who's coming up next? I got
Jonathan Peck.
I got Dick Heller.
Dick Heller. Dick Heller, which the Heller decision from the Supreme Court enormously. I got Jonathan Peck on the brains.
The D.C. versus Heller case gave a definite answer to whether the Second Amendment provides an individual right to keep and bear arms. Up next is Dick Heller from this landmark case.
But first, if you have legal matters that involve firearms, then you need to call California firearms lawyer John Dillon, especially if you have questions about red flag laws, gun registration, gun transportation, or maybe you just need to know that your guns are California compliant. Call our trusted firearms attorney, John Dillon. John Dillon specializes in California gun laws. Call 760-642-7150 or visit the website at DillonLawGP.com.
Back in 2008, the Supreme Court made a huge decision when they decided at it was the Heller versus D.C. case that, yes, the Second Amendment is in fact an individual right, which means it's a civil right. Mm-hmm. Before then, there was a huge discussion that was really, really only a few decades old. Anti-gunners were referring to it as a collective right, which basically meant it really wasn't much of a right at all. And thanks to this decision, they, it was corrected. It was corrected by the Supreme Court, never to be reversed. And the Heller part is a guy named Dick Heller. And I can't tell you how happy I am to have you on to interview you, Dick. How are you?
Hey, you guys pump me up, make me feel good.
Good. Well, thank you so much for stepping up and being the man in the arena. Because what is it like
to be a star?
Well, what is it like to be? Let me kind of paint that a little bit even more. I mean, this is the definitive biggest Second Amendment Supreme Court case ever. What's it like being that guy?
Can you hear me? Am I muted?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I tried to stop you halfway through. To let you know when, like, on June the let's see. Oh, that was June the 7th. Nobody knew my name hardly, and on June the 8th, it was like a rock star. Well, what it was like was the gun fight started in 1976. So 76, 86, 96, 06. It only took 40 years to get there, maybe 30 years to get there.
Right.
So
now, when you say the fight, that's when you were wronged by D.C. It was in 1976.
Correct.
So talk about that. Take us through the timeline. We got you. We got plenty of time. I really want people to understand how important this was. So let's start with the timeline. What happened in 1976?
Well, just about 200 years, almost to the day of July the 4th, 1776, I moved into D.C. So I asked myself, is there a coincidence there? Is God looking over my shoulder? And then a whole lot of other things that happened that just, they couldn't happen by accident, So I moved in and turned on my television set, and my favorite TV program back then was, most people probably can't relate to this, was Matt Dillon, Gunsmoke.
I can relate.
I was going to say, Dave
I can relate.
You're talking Dave's language.
One of my favorite series. So we're on the same page.
The dude was tall, right?
Massive.
Tall man. To be such a good shot at distance, he had to have a big gun, right?
Yeah.
So I said, I was just out of the military, a few years, I don't know, 5 or 6 maybe. And I said, hey, I could have one of those Matt Dillon guns. I lived in D.C., so I drove across the state line into what was then America. It's now called Maryland. Yeah. And I bought a gun, had a 3-day wait. I do remember that. After 3 days was up, I drove back out of the D.C. swamp into America, picked up my gun, and drove it back across the state line and kept it at home. Now, that really sounds alien to the way we're so restricted today, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Whole different world, especially here in California.
Oh, my God, yeah, I forgot. So that was in July, and then 3 months later, August, September, they passed a bill that said everybody has to turn in their guns. They had this complete gun ban. I said, wait a minute.
Just in D.C.?
Just in D.C., 1976. Actually, they passed it in 75, and it went into effect in 76, I think. So I've got this. If you see a buntline Western handgun, it is a work of art. You've got a 9-inch phallic barrel. You've got a cylinder that's pregnant with 9 rounds of 22 Magnum, which is almost the equivalent of a 9mm, and it has this beautiful hand-polished wooden grip on it, right? It's a work of art. And they said, wait a minute. I said, wait a minute. They want me to throw this away, turn it in, or go to jail. And I said, I don't like those options. There's got to be another way. And I hadn't found it at the time, but it really bothered me. I mean, I'm a law-abiding citizen, ex-paratrooper. We obey the law. You know, we're the good guys. And so it took me a couple of days to really try to wrap my head around it, and I made a very intellectual decision. I finally decided one night, ain't doing it.
Good for you.
So,
but you didn't just not comply. You took another step.
Well, here's what I had to do. My brother lived in a suburb right across the line in America, in Silver Spring, Maryland, and it's not America anymore. It's the Soviet state of Maryland. And so I was able to keep it there. And then all I did was drive fast cars, drink beer, and chase beautiful women, and or fast women and beautiful cars. It was so long ago that I've kind of forgotten which it was.
And not always in that order, I'm guessing.
Not always.
So in D.C., back before we had the internet, we had these things called phone books that were about 2 inches thick.
That I remember.
Really? Yeah. If you ask a guy today, and back then, they'll laugh at you and say we only had telephones that had a string on them that attached to the wall, right? But
right.
That's where we were then. So I went down, opened up the phone book, and I went to the think tank section, and there's a couple of hundred think tanks in there, and I just started calling and studying them and talking to people and find out what they were about. And back then, before virtual meetings, a lot of them had lunch lectures. So I attended Cato and Heritage and one of the progressive ones, and I became a student of what politics was all about because, like I say, all it is those three things. I didn't know what politics was, but I know I needed to learn something because they wanted my new work of art. And we found out that I was able to figure out which think tanks were oriented towards freedom and which were not freedom. And so we moved forward a few years, and so that was 76. And 1992 or 3, I was still single. I had this big house on Capitol Hill, a few thousand square feet. So I rented some rooms out with people I worked with, and I met this guy who was a combat pilot, and he studied law in Vietnam on his spare time. So in Virginia, they call that reader at law. So he, by the way, was an Olympic shooter on the 1980s Olympic shooting team, was supposed to go to Russia. So he was a pilot, and I'm a pilot, so we got off to a real good start. And so I got home from work, and he came in, and he says, okay, I've moved my clothes in. I said, what do I do with my guns? And I said, yeah, right. I mean, nobody had a gun, right?
Right. So he didn't know the law that DC had passed.
And he was a stranger, sure.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, right. And he says, no, I've got guns. And I said, really? What kind of gun? And he says, a lot of guns, a trunk full. And then I laughed again. Yeah, right. Because in my world, you didn't have a gun, right? In his world, as an Olympic shooter, he had a trunk full of guns in his car. And I started panicking then, and I said, dude, you've got a trunk load of guns? I mean, I broke out in a cold sweat. I said, you've got to get those guns out of town. You can't have a gun in D.C. And he said, yeah, right.
Jeez. Because it sounds unbelievable, even in this day and age, you know?
Well, wait till you get to the next part. So he said, no, really, I've got a trunk load of guns. I said, dude, we're going to go to jail. You've got to get them out of this country. I mean, out of the city. I said, it's a prison sentence. And he was a student of law and a pilot. So he sat down on the couch, and he put his head in his hands, and he almost started crying. He says, I can't believe this. He says, here I am in the freest country in the world, in the capital city of the freest country in the world, and I can't have my guns. And he said, we've got to do something about this. I'll leave tomorrow and go to Virginia and take them to my storage shed, which he did. And so when we got together again, he says, look, I'm a student at law. I'm going to go to law school, and I'm going to learn how to fight this. And I said, okay, and I'm with you. I'm going to go get a government job where they'll give me a gun as a federal cop, and we'll fight this together. And that's when we came very quickly bonded brothers of the gun.
Well, do you have jewelry that you just don't wear anymore? Maybe a watch that's just gathering dust? Well, what if you went to Leo Hamill's and sold it? You could use the cash to get a gun or take that pistol class you've been talking about. When you sell your used jewelry or watches to Leo Hamill, not only do you get the best deal, you are also supporting the Second Amendment. One of the easiest ways to support the Second Amendment is to support our partners like Leo Hamill. Call 619-299-1500 and visit their showroom on San Diego Avenue and always get awesome service at Leo's.
All right, we're talking to Dick Heller from Heller versus D.C., the very, very famous and extremely important Second Amendment decision that came out in 2008. So you guys decided to sue. Did you have any idea what you were getting into? I mean, financially, and did you ever think that one day, hey, this has got to go to the Supreme Court, or what were your expectations at the time?
Well, I think back up just one step. One of the things that really got me motivated was I looked around and I realized that if I went to work for the government, that they would give me a gun. But then when I'm not working to protect them, I could not go home to protect myself.
Yeah.
And that's when it hit me.
Hypocritical.
You come up with sound bites in your life, right? That's when I realized, and it was very apropos at the time, we lived in a two-tiered society already back in the early 2000s, not unlike the old Soviet Union. And it's just gone downhill from there. So then it took... what happened is, since I had my buddy Dane, the attorney Dane von Breikenrickard, who is also a medical doctor, he said, I want to go to law school. And when he completed law school, we put him together on one paycheck. We put him into law school and worked together with just one paycheck. And we got him some scholarships. But when he got his degree, he didn't even want to take the bar. He says, I have no interest in the bar. I just wanted to learn how to structure a case that we could win. Wow. And he came up with the idea that the only place we could win, because of the decisions of the other circuit courts, was we have to do it in the D.C. circuit. It's the only place that had not had a Second Amendment decision yet, and we had, obviously, some favorable judges at the time, and Kavanaugh was there at the time, and that was helpful overall.
That's interesting. So Justice Kavanaugh, who's on the Supreme Court right now, was a part of the same district.
He was in the D.C. circuit at that time.
Circuit, yeah.
And he made a major decision for us on Heller 2, which involved the ARAKs. So when we worked with Cato, and they were building a case, and we were building a case, and since we were connected, we'd met each other, we joined our cases, and it just so happened, it's hard to keep a long story short, but ultimately, and maybe it's a story for the book, 5 of the other plaintiffs were dismissed, and we had gone down to register my handgun, which you couldn't register, but we went down and got rejected, and I asked the person down at the registration, I said, I can't register a handgun. Okay, could you write the regulation down on my application and put your name on there and your phone number? And I'm folding up this piece of paper, and I'm walking out the door like I just robbed the bank because I have rejection evidence, right?
And that's what's going to help you in your case. So I'll tell you what, let me ask you a couple. I have a couple of kind of do some quick question answer. Just some things I've always wondered. So, okay, so you've talked about a lot of people and a couple of different organizations. When did NRA jump in?
They came in and for Heller 2 in a big way. Heller 2 and 3 in a big way.
Okay, so quickly, Heller 1 was what?
I just wanted my gun.
Okay, and what was the result of Heller 1? Heller
1 produced that magnificent Justice Antonin Scalia decision that said that handgun or firearms ownership of any kind of gun, basically, is a constitutionally enumerated individual civil right.
And what was it like after Heller 1 when that decision came out? What was it? What was that feeling? Describe that feeling.
Well, with all the news coverage, it was very nerve-wracking because that's a totally new experience when people are asking you questions that, we were just fighting to get there, and then, how did you do it? Well, I didn't figure out how we did it till a year later. I came up with a 100% success formula of how you do things. So it was a new experience, and it was very nerve-wracking.
Was there any blowback? Did you have any threats or anybody, tell you, threaten you or anything?
Zero. And today they would burn your house down, and I would have to take somebody out. But back then, everyone was still civil. That was in 2008, before the communists were running the country.
Okay, so that's Heller 1, and that it's a civil right. The right to keep and bear arms. Scalia wrote the decision. It was enormous. So what was Heller 2?
Heller 2 and Heller 3 was a challenge to each one of the 16 elements the district could produced in the next month. So they had I'm thinking they had prepared Plan B if they lost, and they basically collected every gun regulation from around the country and put it into law. And we challenged all 16 of the elements. Like you had to register every 3 years, you had to get fingerprinted every 6 years, or vice versa, and you had to have a certain kind of vision. And there were just 16 elements that you can see in HellerGunCase.org. It's got them all listed.
And just so people know, like D.C., your laws are made by Congress, right? It's not a city council.
The city council was given home rule in the 90s. So what they basically do is they have like the equivalent of a state government in the little city council of 13 members, and as long as they don't do anything egregious, like demand to be a state, then the Congress pretty much leaves them alone.
But you were suing, but it was Congress in 1976 that passed that law, right?
No, that was D.C. passed the law.
Okay.
and nobody raised an eyebrow in Congress.
So what's it like to own a gun? Let's say I move into Washington, D.C., downtown Washington, D.C. tomorrow. What's it like now? Can I bring a gun? Can I buy a gun? What are some of the hurdles, or what's it like?
I'll give you an example. We threatened Heller 4 was I challenged them on the ghost gun. I had been harmed. They didn't produce my the FFL was directed to return the Polymer 80 gun back to the retailer in North Carolina. So I had been harmed. We challenged them on it, and they just rolled over like within a few days.
Wow.
That's kind of the reputation that we have for winning.
Are there gun shops in D.C.?
There are no gun shops, but to answer your question, you simply bring your gun into town and register it within like 48 hours. Maybe it's 24. Probably 48 hours. Just go down and register it, keep it at home and register it, and you're good to go. They'll run a NICS test on you and give you a registration number, which I think is unconstitutional, but you go up the ladder one rung at a time, right?
So how do you buy, if you're not a resident of, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here. If you're not like a resident of Virginia or Maryland, how do you go to a Virginia gun shop and buy a gun?
Oh, real simple. You just get one. Like, I know what I want, so I order on the internet, or I go across the river to America and go to Northern Virginia Gun Shop, and you make your purchase, and then they have a partner FFL inside the District of Columbia.
Oh, I see.
Handle the transfer, and they register it, and blah blah blah. And
I get you. What about carrying? Are concealed carry permits even? Is that a thing?
Oh, sure, yeah.
In DC?
And you asked that. I just wrote a letter today. I'm getting ready to send to the police chief. When my CCL expired, I renewed it, and all of a sudden, I find out it takes a minimum of 6. They're going to take the full 60 days allotted by law to reissue me. So I have to walk around the streets naked.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. I was my CCW expired, and I was permitless for like 2 or 3 weeks, and it's weird when you carry every day for a couple of years and then you can't. It feels very strange. You feel very vulnerable. Yeah, and correction. You realize just how vulnerable you are.
Well, and here we're in the middle of the revolutionary swamp.
Yeah.
And when they were burning down statues, I'm on one of the main streets, 3 blocks from the Lincoln statue. I had a gun at every window. I was ready.
So what do you do, by the way? What's your career? Because I'm a
cop, dude.
You're a cop, really?
Yeah.
For DC PD?
No, the federal prison system.
Oh wow. Okay. Cool.
I get off work at 4 p.m. this afternoon.
And so that's the reference when you were saying, hey, if I go to work for the government, they give me a gun to protect them. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. So you were doing all this in your spare time, you know?
Well, you got to do, you know, every time I think about, well, it gets a little dreary sometimes. I think of those poor fellows in Valley Forge. Don't get me crying now, walking through the snow with bleeding feet. Give me a break. Everybody should be doing something.
And that's exactly why I brought that up, because what you did was enormously important. Do you have another segment in it? Because I want to talk about, I want to touch on some of the particulars a little bit, talk about the changes. I want to hear what you have to say about some of the proposals that are coming up. But then I kind of want to talk about how you feel about some of this stuff, because you were just a guy. You were just a guy living in Washington D.C. You and your buddy just had an idea, and boom, you guys changed the world. And I want to hear a little bit more about how you feel about that. So can you hang with us and go one more segment?
Sure. You want to go to 9 o'clock?
Our time, yeah. Well, your time.
No, we're only here till 6. Give me a break. I've been on for 6 hours. Hang in there, buddy. You ever wish cleaning your guns was easier? Clean, lube, and protect your guns with Seal 1. Seal 1 CLP Plus is natural, non-toxic, and environmentally friendly. Clean your guns easier and faster. You'll also smell so better. And something your wife will appreciate. One and done with Seal 1. Ask for it by name at your local gun shop or get some on their website. Seal1.com, that's seal, the number 1.com.
We're here with Dick Heller, as in Heller versus D.C., extremely important Second Amendment decision from the Supreme Court. Okay, so we're waiting on another Supreme Court decision that has to do with guns that could be tomorrow, could be a week from tomorrow, but most people believe that it's going to be it's coming here in June. What are your thoughts on that?
It'll probably, if they follow their pattern, it'll be the last day and the last week of the session. And from what I was hearing, listening on broadcast of the hearing back on November the 3rd, what we found was the New York attorney, I guess she was the Attorney General or Assistant Deputy Attorney General, she made some very disingenuous statements, and Alito caught her on it. And they were asking the kinds of questions that said, well, why not this, why not that, which sort of puts us in a rather maybe narrowly tailored position, but sort of pro-Second Amendment, because Alito is very pro-Second Amendment. As a matter of fact, in the Massachusetts Caetano stun gun case, he wrote a separate opinion called a concurring opinion, where he put in there the phrase, anything that you used to protect your life cannot be unconstitutional. Interestingly, to show that laws might change but principles don't change, that is almost word for word what Marcus forgot his name. Marcus Cicero said 50 years before Christ. He said nearly the same thing. He said nothing to protect your life is immoral.
So you think that you think the decision is going to go our way, and you think it's going to? I think it'll probably change firearms, carry the way that your case changed ownership. Don't you think?
It has to some effect, but you just never know.
That's a fact. You never know.
You don't know, and unless there's some spies like the lefties in the abortion release, everything is honorable and kept close to the chest until the time to release, until the release date.
So let me ask you a couple questions. We actually got a couple questions for you. Action Jackson, 9 years old, shoots every week. He's got a question for you, Dick.
Certainly.
What's your favorite gun?
Good question.
Very good question. It's the question, Jackson, that I ask everyone. I am an instructor, so I think the best instructors start off with a revolver for their students. So my favorite gun, of course, by the way, I don't use 9mm. I use 22s, and then I have a gun that shoots both 22s and changeable cylinders, uses magnums, and it has almost the same muzzle energy, I call it horsepower, as a 9mm without all the recoil and the artillery noise. So I train all my students on revolvers and 22s, and my favorite gun is my $1 million Supreme Court gun, of course.
Yeah, the one that you were describing earlier.
Yes.
Okay, so do you what are your thoughts on California? I don't know how to put this, and maybe you don't have an answer, and that's okay. But I think a lot of people kind of wonder, like, well, gee, the Heller thing happened in 2008. McDonald happened in 2010, saying, hey, you gotta apply the Heller decision against the states, and here we are in California 10 years later, and it feels like things are worse than they were. Do you think about that much, or what are your thoughts on that?
I do. It just so happens that, are you all familiar with Alexander Beck in San Diego?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, you've got one of the two brightest minds on the Second Amendment, in my opinion, and he chats with my other lawyer here in Virginia, William J. Olson, and with a team like that, you have the best counsel on the planet. So he's the perfect one to ask your questions of.
Yeah, well, and we're working our way through, and of course, we Gun Owners Radio. I work for and run San Diego County Gun Owners, and we have cases against our assault weapons ban and against our pistol roster and against the under 21. We have 5 lawsuits rolling here. And I don't think any of that would have happened without your case, without the Heller versus DC case. I think we'd all still be kind of hoping and praying, and there'd still be this ridiculous argument. Which, by the way, what are your thoughts on that? Before Heller, there was an absolute, argument from the other side saying, "Hey, there's no individual right. They were talking about a collective right, and as long as we have the National Guard." Then civilians don't have to own firearms.
I have the answer for that. Most people don't pay much attention to Miller, and I read as much as I can, and I never thought much of Miller. But then you have a case there in California, Virginia Duncan, against
the Mags, sure.
Attorney General. Are you familiar with that case?
Yeah, I know her actually personally, and the normal capacity Mag case, absolutely.
I'd like to meet her, but anyway, we have a brief to the Supreme Court supporting her certiorari, so to get her case heard in the Supreme Court. And in this brief, with the Heller Foundation name on the front, by the way, you should read that, by Bill Olson. The Miller Court had no misunderstanding of the purpose of the Second Amendment, and they cited an 1840 case which explains exactly why military-grade weapons are critical in the hands of civilians.
Yep.
To protect the public liberty and to keep in awe those who are in power and to maintain the supremacy of the laws and the Constitution.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Dick. I just want to, for the audience, the Miller case was the decision that actually allowed to, like, for example, ban short-barreled shotguns. They said, hey, you know what, we should be able to ban this. But the interesting thing, and what you're bringing up here, which I always thought was very interesting too, is the reason they can ban short-barreled shotguns is because they don't serve a military purpose. And basically saying, hey, that's the reason for the Second Amendment, right?
That is the reason for the Second Amendment. And having lived in Europe and walked through some of the warfare trenches, I can't think of a better trench warfare gun than a sawed-off shotgun. Well,
I agree there. But the principle, what you're saying is, I think a lot of the anti-gunners have used Miller against the pro-Second Amendment folks. But I think it should be flipped right on its ear. It's actually a very pro-Second Amendment decision, even though it resulted in banning short-barreled shotguns. Now, once your decision came out and the other side flipped and said, "Oh, no, we always knew it was an individual right, but we can still restrict it severely," what were your thoughts on that?
That's what they do. As soon as we walked outside the Supreme Court and we were in front of the microphones and we had our 10 minutes, great day for America, and great day for the citizens of D.C. and all that, then the mayor of D.C., Mayor Fenty, gets on his soapbox, and he said, well, you have your guns, and he's all puckered up like he's just sucking on a lemon. He says, but we have gun control, in a very snarly way. And look, I was just a neophyte. I didn't know anything. I said, oh, my God, what just happened? We won, and now we get this. What does that mean? And it went downhill again. And then that's so 1 month later, we had to file Heller 2.
Yeah. And what's the purpose of the Heller Foundation?
We're fundraising and try to be a little educational for all our next cases. As soon as the New York case is released, we've got a couple more.
Yeah.
That decision will sort of help us determine which direction we go in our next lawsuit.
And I think one of the other things about the New York decision, the Kerry decision, is it's going to dictate how courts look at Second Amendment cases from here on out, and we're hoping that they basically stick to the text, right? Is that the idea?
Well, here's what I like to say. Governments will eliminate bad guys' guns as effectively as they've eliminated bad guys pushing drugs.
Yeah.
You can't disarm the good guys and leave the bad guys running the country. And what I say, my new soundbite is, if I think I sent it this to if I can remember it, to Thomas Massey today. I said, Thomas Massey, please tell the council, the House, that have AOC and Pelosi go down into the city and deliver a gun registration form to the Crips and the Bloods, and then come back and talk to me.
Yeah, I wonder how that's going to work out. That's funny. Well, Dick, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for doing what you did to make that case happen. I know it was a huge sacrifice. It sounds like you found your calling in life, which is wonderful, but I know it was an enormous sacrifice, but I can't tell you how valuable and important it was to the rest of the country. Thank you for coming on and talking to us, Dick.
Certainly, my pleasure.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Let's get a grip on this topic with Joe next.
But first, a lot of companies are very frustrated with their website. It looks old, it's out of date, and it's not getting any customers. Well, Sage Tree gets it. Since 2005, Sage Tree has been helping companies with websites that look great, work great, and get leads. Stop being frustrated by your website and get one that you're proud to share. Contact Sage Tree today to get websites that makes the phone ring. Getting started is easy. Call 866-728-9100. That's 866-728-9100. And you can fix your website today.
Are you going to ask?
Nope.
Not going to ask me what's going on? All right, I'll tell you what's happening.
Somebody ask him.
All right.
Action Jackson, ask him what he wrote.
What did he write?
Yeah, say, Joe, what'd you write?
So, what is your right?
All right. So, so wrote a little bit about expecting different results from doing the same stuff over and over again, and talking about the latest mass murder event, I guess we just had in Texas. The reaction is always the same from certain parties. I guess is it's always the screaming, the calling for more gun control stuff, and. If it was just if the desire was okay, we have to do it because that's the argument you always hear. We have to do something. I remember riding. There was a group I used to cycle with a lot, and I remember we do these 3-4 hour rides, and I remember talking to a guy when we were cycling, and he was kind of to the left a little bit of me anyway, and we were talking about guns and things, and his argument was, well, we just have to do something. And then, so the engineer in me comes out, right? So I ask, okay, if there's a problem you're trying to address, and that this something that you're proposing doesn't address the problem, will have no effect, zero. Would you still do it? And he says, yes, absolutely. And at that point, I just kind of drifted away and let him ride on. But it's you do things. This idea that we do something, and it really doesn't. If you're going to address a problem, and let's do things that address the problem and see if we could make things a little bit better. And when it comes to gun control and stuff, you have to remember that and I try not to be cynical like this, but I think I've been doing this long enough now to understand that the idea isn't to make things better. The stuff with gun control, coming from that one area of the political spectrum, it's not about increasing public safety. It's not about impeding criminals. It's about disarming the public. That's all it's about. And so, it's interesting because when we talk about let's have a discussion, and you hear a lot about bipartisan talks on this stuff. And Michael and I were just talking about this on the first segment. And they make a big deal. Okay, bipartisan discussion. But it's never really a bipartisan discussion on this thing, because this happens every time there's one of these events. And there's this big uproar, and they talk about they want to do a bipartisan discussion and see if we can resolve something or make some progress. But it's never really a discussion. It's always the Democrats demanding more gun control. It's always the Republicans pretty much giving up everything. And the people that lose are the American people, not just gun owners. We lose a little bit of our rights, a little bit of our freedoms every time we go through this kind of cycle. And so when I was writing about it, I'm thinking, okay, what would it look like, if we really had a discussion, if we really had people that really wanted to address this issue, what might that discussion look like, or what might they talk about? And there's a couple of things that I think Americans should consider, all Americans, no matter your political feelings. But, for instance, when you have dishonest, or willfully ignorant politicians that are doing things, and you listen to what they say, and you know they're not, it's hard to believe that they just don't know this stuff. I mean, this is stuff that I could find out pretty easily, and I could research pretty easily. And when you hear politicians that have a number of, staff people and access to a lot of stuff, and they're saying these things, and you have to think, are they being dishonest, or they really don't know? Which, I don't know which one of those things is worse. But for instance, there's a Republican rep in New York, a guy named Chris Jacobs, who decided he was going to go along with the Democrats in Congress and vote on this severe gun control thing that they were talking about. And what happened was immediately, like within a day or two of this, all of his sponsors, all of his supporters on the Republican side, they pulled their endorsements, they pulled their support, and Jacobs ended up retiring, basically, pulling out of the race, saying, okay, he's not going to run for re-election again, because the reaction was so strong, from his supporters that felt abandoned by that kind of stuff. And that's how it's done. That's something that Americans can do and think about. When you have, you have to remember, and I always make this mistake too, or I make this mistake a lot, where, I'll refer to these people as our leaders, and we forget sometimes they're not our leaders, they're our representatives. We elect these people, we send them, we put them in the office to represent us. So they're more representatives than leaders. And when they're not representing us, then we should also take action and remove them. So that's what Jacob's constituents did, which is exactly the way to do it. Another thing is talking about the real problem, and we mentioned this a little bit too in the opening segment. Realistically, when we have these school shootings or mass shootings, all this kind of stuff, it's not a gun issue, and any rational person knows it's not a gun issue. It's a mental health issue. And we do a terrible, terrible job in this country with mental health, and that's some place where we really need to be focusing, and as Americans, we really need to demand that. I was looking at, one of the guys I read a lot is John Hinderaker from the Powerline blog, and he was writing about this last week. And he was saying that, over the last 60 years, the number of beds that we have available in psychiatric hospitals in this country dropped by 96%. 96% over the last 60 years. And, and there were a number of decisions. President Reagan, I guess, made a bad decision like that with, how that really influenced how we deal with mental health. But, I mean, that's the kind of, a drop of 96%. If we had 100 beds 60 years ago, that means we'd have 4 beds today.
Jeez.
That's what a drop of 96% is. So, if we're going to talk about this stuff rationally, that's what we need to be talking about. If we were going to have a bipartisan discussion about this, especially with the incidents that happen at schools, then, one of the first things we should be talking about is getting rid of these ridiculous gun-free zones. These gun-free zones, are a bigger part of the problem probably than anything else, and that's the quickest, easiest, cheapest thing we could do that would get us, almost immediate results. Because you have to remember, in our society, unfortunately, the way things are, we sensationalize these things. The media sensationalizes these events. The politicians politicize these events. It makes it seem like we have many more of these events than we actually do. And if you're looking at this, you try to look at this, say, from a school administrator's point of view. Okay, what do we do to make our school safe? Well, people come up with these different ideas. Every place should have a school resource officer present, each school. And, and I wrote about this on an op-ed a couple of years ago on this subject that was in the Union. And, if I look at, like, where I live in Lakeside, there's 6 schools, I think, in the district. There's 2 middle schools and 4 elementary schools. So if you're going to have a school resource officer at each of those schools, that's $150,000 to $250,000 per officer at each school. So what's a school district supposed to do? How are they supposed to fund that? And then do you have one at each of the 6 schools, or do you make the command decision, well, we're only going to cover the middle schools? Well, then what happens if you have an event at one of the elementary schools? How do you explain that?
So I did the calculations. If we increased the federal budget, or spending, I should say, if we increased the federal spending by just over 0.5%, we could put 2 to 3 armed officers at every single K through 12 school in the United States.
I got a better idea.
What?
Teachers union pay for them.
Yeah, even better.
They could do that. So
You
read
don't
my
think-
article. It's very good. You'll
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Awesome job.
GetAgrip.com.
Great job.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. I lost my page here. That's what happens when you talk here. So, former candidate for sheriff, Jonathan Peck, is next.
But first, do you know we have a world-class training school here in San Diego? Pilots can fly almost every day. We're close to the ocean, the desert, even the mountains, and we're right next to an international border and a major military base. That's why San Diego is one of the best places to learn how to fly in the world. Learn to fly in the heart of San Diego right at Montgomery Field. Getting started is real easy. Just give them a call, 858-569-1822, or go to Learn to Fly SDFTI. But call them at 858-569-1822 and thank them for sponsoring Gun Owners Radio.
All right, just in case you were living under a rock, we had an election on Tuesday, and one of the big decisions people had to make was for sheriff, and it's basically an open seat. There were 7 folks who jumped in, and one of them who I'm particularly fond of is on with us, Jonathan Peck. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, just to so you and I, just full disclosure, so everybody knows, you and I know each other. You and I used to hang out in the same circles years ago, kind of lost touch, but then reconnected during the election, and I was really glad to see that you jumped in. But I just want everybody to know, I just want to talk about your experiences, talk about your thoughts, but none of this is prepared, right? We didn't prepare this at all.
No, just a text message to have you on today.
Yep. Okay, good. Well, so I'll tell you what. Let's start from the beginning. Why did you jump in? Let's just say that. How come you jumped into the race?
Well, what really set it up was all the COVID measures over the last 2 years, and being in law enforcement, watching basically the Constitution got thrown out for what they said was an emergency.
Yeah.
And that had really bothered me, and I've been fighting it within my own department as much as possible. And then I was actually approached kind of at the last minute for the sheriff's race by some members of my community that had looked at all the sheriff's candidates and said they couldn't support anybody, and they knew my stance, on fighting all the COVID measures and everything, and so they asked me to run, and I didn't want to at all. It's politics is kind of a nightmare to me, but I looked at it and said, they're right, and I am kind of the only person who will run and represent these people. So I said, well, let's give it a shot and see what happens,
And you're a Republican. You ran as a Republican, and the folks who approached you, in essence, are. And I don't think we need to sugarcoat anything. The Republicans endorsed a horrible candidate, and that is in part, at least, the reason that you were recruited to run and you ran. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, and I was looking for a reason to say no when they first approached me, and so I went and looked at the candidates, and I was looking for anybody who would have just said, hey, government overreached during the COVID stuff. They violated some stuff. We need to make sure that never happens again. Never arrest a paddleboarder on the beach again. That was a mistake, and there was nobody saying that. And so I said, well, I guess I got to be the guy to say that.
Well, and I got to tell you, you and I spoke right after you jumped in, gave me a call, and we reconnected, and San Diego County Gun Owners had already gone through the endorsement process, but you and I chatted a lot, and I'm continue to be extremely impressed with how your campaign took off. Impressed but not surprised, because I know who you are, and I watched, and you did a great job. But man, it not only did things take hold for you, and you didn't have $1 million in the bank. It's hard to raise money, number one, and it's it's just hard to raise money in any, even the perfect situation. It's hard to raise money, but you the people were really excited. So you got a lot of people on your side really quick without spending money, and they were really excited about you. What's your reaction to their reaction?
I'm completely overwhelmed. When we started, it was basically me and one other guy were completely dedicated to this. And so we just went, the VFW up in Ramona is the first place I spoke. And just the amazing response I got from just telling people, that I actually want to represent them and defend their rights, and that I want them to be armed because I want them protecting me when I'm out on the road by myself. And that just resonated so much with people. I didn't expect that. I thought the constitutional sheriff thing would kind of be a fringe thing, and it turns out there's an incredible amount of people who they want that so badly, to have a sheriff that represents the people and not a sheriff that just kind of does the bidding of the politicians.
And, you're a legit gun guy, too. I know that firsthand for a fact, and it was really, really nice and refreshing. It always is nice and refreshing to hear anyone running for office unapologetic about their stance on the Second Amendment, and I'm so glad that it resonated with so many people. I got to tell you, we got a lot of feedback. We get a lot of emails, phone calls, texts, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, blah, blah, blah. Everybody, communicates with us, which I invite. I love it. I think our members and our followers are really engaged with our organization. That's fantastic. But by far, we got a lot of inquiries about you. And I never had a bad word to say, and said, yeah, he's a legit 2A guy, and check him out. Here's what we did and why we did it, but check him out. And, you and I talked throughout. What did you learn? What kind of things did you learn when you were running for office here? Because this is the first time you've ever done anything political, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely the first time. I just learned that there are so many great people out there, and there's really an awakening going on in the last couple of years. And I had no idea how that was going to translate into votes. And then, with the mail-in ballots for everyone, who knows where that leads in the future of California. But, I learned there's a lot of people out there that didn't feel represented. And I'm kind of looking at how best to serve those people now. I'm still working law enforcement full time, so it's hard to do that. I'm just kind of looking at, how I can repay these people for being so supportive of me.
Well, hey, Jonathan, this is Joe, and I just wanted to say to you that, I know you didn't make it this time, but I hope you're going to stay involved and engaged, and I hope you're going to continue in some form here in our political process, because our system is broken. Our party is broken out here, and what we need are people exactly like you that have exactly the character and exactly the positions that you have to get involved here and help us get things fixed, basically, and get this back. They're talking about a red, what are they calling it, a tsunami here in November. And somebody yesterday was saying it's hopefully it'll be more like a red reset, because it doesn't matter. You don't want to get the same old people back in office again. It doesn't do anything. We need people that feel the way you do and think the way you do in office to change things. So I hope you're going to stay with us here, Jonathan. I hope you're not gone after this.
No, I'll stick around in some form. I see, mostly the gun grab that's being attempted right now it makes me wonder what they're planning to where they don't want the people to be armed. So, I think even though I'm in law enforcement, I'm exempt from all this stuff. Everyone I care about, almost everyone I love, they're kind of held down by all these stupid gun laws in California. So, I'm a huge advocate for it, even though it doesn't affect me, directly.
Did you get any pushback while you were running from your employer?
No, I think they're afraid of me. It's illegal for them to do anything to me for this, but, they always have their ways of coming at you some other way. But luckily I have an extremely clean record in my job, and so it'll be really hard to do that. But, saying the things I'm saying, nobody at the tops of any department likes that. So we'll see. Hopefully nothing happens.
It was, it seemed like, what was your strategy? Talk a little bit about your strategy. It seemed like you were getting votes from, there seemed to be a church element and there seemed to be a rural element, but talk a little bit about your strategy.
So it started out just going anywhere anyone would let me speak and just speaking what I believe to be true. And it turns out that's kind of an anomaly in politics, so a lot of people responded to that. But what ended up happening is a lot of the health freedom people, over the COVID lockdowns and everything, all those health freedom people, everybody who had their churches closed, people who had businesses closed, people who don't like their kids wearing masks, all those people kind of flocked to me and said, you're the only one saying this was wrong for the government to do this to us, and you're the only one saying you would step up and prevent that as sheriff. And so that was really kind of my base that I didn't even know was going to be my base.
That's interesting. What was so that was the most? Would you say that the COVID stuff was the most common asked question when you say, "Hey, I'm running for sheriff"? Was that the most common question?
Well, that and CCWs.
Yeah.
So my position is, hey, the Second Amendment says nothing about you asking your government permission to keep and bear arms. There's no way to read it and assume that's what they meant. And so I said it would be unlawful for the sheriff to enforce California's illegal gun laws. And then the next question I always got was, but what about CCWs?
Interesting. Yeah, it's I used to get that all the time too. I mean, they're finally issuing. There's still some hoops to jump through, but the way I put it is there's still some hoops to jump through, but now the hoops are big enough so everyone can fit.
Yeah.
And for you've seen me. If I can fit through the hoop, anybody can fit through the hoop, right? So, but I used to get that question all the time. I mean, I would I'd tell people, yeah, I could go up there and read The Cure for Cancer, and the first question would be, how do I get my CCW? I mean, people really, really want to know, and not just Republicans, and not just a certain type of people. I mean, it was everybody, all ages, every background, every kind of political. People wanted to know, hey, how can I defend myself? And it cuts across party lines. You were a Republican. I got to tell you, one of the things I'm hoping you'll do is get really, really, really involved in the local Republican Party. What are your thoughts as far as the future?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Obviously, they need some help. Something needs to change in the local Republican Party because there have been a lot of great candidates, and they've mentioned that the Republican Party locally only cares about how much money you can raise, not about your stance as a candidate. And that needs to change because it seems like the Republican Party is just kind of professional losers in California, putting up, watered down candidates and, nobody that really stands apart from the Democrats and nobody who, real conservatives can get behind and get excited about and, maybe even go on a freeway overpass with a sign for free and campaign for them.
Well, there's an enormous disconnect between the Republican Party and Republicans. Republicans think that the Republican Party enforces their platform and vets candidates with any kind of competence, and neither of those are true. The Republican Party does not do that. Jonathan, we're going to bring you over to the next segment, man. Stay with us.
Awesome, thanks.
PRMI Mortgage, primeres.com/Alpine. Hey, if you're looking to buy, refi, or if you're just considering a reverse mortgage, call our local mortgage guy that you can trust. Call Chris Wiley at PRMI Mortgage. For nearly 25 years, Chris has been helping local San Diegans with all their mortgage needs. They make it easy. Work with a friendly expert team that will help you get the best deal on a mortgage. Call Chris Wiley at 619-722-1303 or just go to primeres.com/Alpine.
All right, we're talking to former candidate for sheriff in San Diego here, Jonathan Peck, and we were just talking about how everything went. So what was the best part? What did you enjoy most about running for office?
I loved saying things that nobody else could say.
Yeah, talk about that.
Amazing feeling.
Talk about like why can't they say what you were saying?
So I've been on a patrol guy. So I drive a patrol car the last 19 years. So I haven't had to take a knee to climb the ladder at all. And anyone who climbs the ladder in any government organization kind of has to watch what they say just to make sure they don't step on the toes of the people who got them there. So I was able to go out and just say anything I wanted. And, one of the candidates ended up, using some of my answers at a thing we were speaking at together too, because he saw the response I was getting from people and the lack of response he was getting.
So he was cheating off your paper there?
Yeah. It was some of my stuff from the Union Tribune.
So Action Jackson, 9 years old, one of our co-hosts here. He shoots every Wednesday. He goes shooting with his 9mm Glock, and he wants to confirm that you are in fact a legit gun guy, John. So go ahead. What's your question?
What's your favorite gun?
Good question.
My favorite gun is my Savage B-17. I know this is going to be controversial, but it's my favorite because I teach my kids to shoot with it. And it's dead on accurate to about 185 yards, and the kids can still hit aluminum cans to 200.
Whoa.
No recoil, dead accurate, and I can shoot it with no ear protection, although I wouldn't recommend it for people with good ears.
That's awesome. What do you think? Is he a legit gun guy, Jackson?
Yeah, I would go shooting with him.
You'd go shooting with him. Good. All right, you passed the test. Good job.
Well, thank you. That's the important part.
So we got a lot of heat from folks that really liked you, and I was glad to see it. I love seeing people that are passionate about the Second Amendment, but we definitely got heat from folks who said, "Hey, how come you didn't endorse, Peck?" And so let's the tough question. I mean, what are your thoughts on San Diego County Gun Owners? I know we didn't endorse you. But what are your thoughts on our organization? And, do you have a critique for us, or do you have any advice going forward, or any animosity, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a member, and I'm still a member. I was a member before this started. Because you endorsed before I even entered the race, I can't fault you at all for not endorsing me. It would have been awesome if you said, no, we like this guy instead, and pulled the endorsement, but I understand why you didn't do that. I'm going to remain a member. I would like to see people start advocating for the Second Amendment as it is written instead of kind of asking permission. I know your big focus is CCWs, but if we could get enough people together to say, no, this is all unconstitutional and it shouldn't be done, we could at least put some pressure on politicians to do a little better here in California.
I don't disagree with what you just said. I mean, I would love that. It feels like that's we're on getting CCW so that everyone could get a CCW in San Diego, that's like step 100, and we're on like step 3,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's a huge victory, and I don't like the hoops that you have to jump through to get the CCW. I think the Supreme Court is probably going to take away one of those hoops here in about a week or two. I think that the Supreme Court decision with the New York case is probably going to completely eliminate good cause. And I think that's wonderful. But this is a really good example of how, activists can get something done in a positive manner. And, we don't have to rely on courts. Courts are going to complement the situation. But I don't disagree with what you said. I know you're passionate about the Second Amendment, and it's really, really good to hear. And thank you so much for understanding. I was really impressed by your campaign, and I was really impressed by the folks who supported you. And it really got to the point where I'd talk to people and say, well, here's the deal, and yeah, I know Jonathan, and he's a legit 2A guy. And it kind of got to the point where I said, if you don't like, if you can't vote for a Democrat, then just don't vote for the Republican that they endorsed. Definitely, at least vote for Jonathan. If there's no way I can convince you to vote for a Democrat, okay, fine. I get it. There are other things. There are other issues that weigh into this thing other than the Second Amendment. But we're a Second Amendment organization, so vote for Peck for sure. Absolutely, he's a really great guy. And I think that I think every single one of your votes took away from Hemmerling. Which is thank you. That's an enormous accomplishment, because he really is. He's a disaster. I don't know. How much do you mind going into your thoughts on Hemmerling?
I'm trying to be nice, but he rescinded his Family First pledge. When at that point, I'm kind of like, what? I at least have to say the true things that he's doing, because I can't respect somebody who does that just for political reasons. What's
the Family First pledge?
So the way politicians or anyone running for office gets basically into the churches is there's a Salt and Light Council who has this Family First pledge, and it's basically traditional family values. You read it, sign it, send it into them, and then they'll start to invite you to church events. And after the UT pulled his endorsement, the editorial board endorsement, he apparently contacted Dran Reese, who's the head of the Salt and Light Council, and rescinded his Family's First pledge.
Yeah, that the funny thing, it's not the crime, it's the cover up. This is kind of along those lines. It wasn't so much what he said that the Union Tribune didn't like, but the fact that he couldn't explain it. And I got to tell you, that's kind of what we uncovered when he was on the radio show back in January. It wasn't so much what he was. Well, it was, because he's this red flag law stuff is just a disaster, and we really there's no way we ever would have supported him, considering what a zealot he was for spreading gun violence restraining orders. But the way he reacted to it and the kind of the mealy-mouthed, wishy-washy way that he just won't stand for anything, and that's exactly what the Union Tribune discovered when they circle back and questioned him on his comments, is guy's got no backbone. He's got no business near authority in any way. Hey, let's talk about red flag laws, gun violence restraining orders real quick. So you've been a law enforcement officer for 19 years. What are your thoughts on gun violence restraining orders?
So I believe they're a complete violation of the Second Amendment. I believe there are definitely people out there that shouldn't have guns that haven't committed a crime, but there's no one in the government I trust to determine who those people are and take their guns away. And that's, my stance is you might be able to save some lives with them, but you can't violate everyone else's rights to do that.
Now, being a 19-year veteran and law enforcement, has there ever been a time that you have you thought, gee, this person, this criminal or whatever doesn't have or shouldn't have a firearm, and I'm having a hard time taking their firearms away? Does that make sense? Have you ever had difficulties? Has there ever been a need, I guess, for a gun violence restraining order?
Not anything I've encountered. Usually if you talk to people and you can determine they're a danger to themselves or others, they'll, willfully go get treatment. They'll willfully, surrender their guns without, the actual restraining order.
Well, our big question, of course, when he was working for Mara Elliott, the city attorney, our big question that I've said this over and over and over again is, hey, if they're violating the law, which is what you just described, you can already take firearms away. Law enforcement can already take firearms away. If they're not violating the law, why are we taking firearms away? And that was a question she simply. She looked like a deer in headlights. And I think it all boils down. I think that's the crucial question right there. If you're not breaking the law, why are we taking away the rights of an adult American?
Well, exactly. And where do you draw that line? Throughout the last 2 years, how many people called us crazy for saying stuff about COVID that turned out to be true, even family members? And what if those people had said, well, this guy's dangerous, we need to take his guns, when you were right the whole time and you're not a danger to anyone? That's the slippery slope we're looking at with this. Yeah,
no kidding. It really is. What are you going to do as far as the sheriff's race from here on out? Are you going to be involved on either side, or is there another race that you like, that are there any candidates that you want to try to help, or what are you going to do as far, leading up to the November election?
Well, they're 195,000 uncounted votes. So I'm not.
I'm sorry. You're right.
Out of it yet.
My apologies. Let's say my apologies. You're right.
Yeah. We can hope for the best. In the sheriff's race, I don't think anyone needs help here. I think people are helping themselves, and it's gonna pan out pretty clearly what they believe in. I just want to get together with a lot of the candidates that had run for the first time this time. They're just awesome people who looked at everything that's going on and said, I have to do something, and, get with them and see what we can do as a group, because most of them didn't make it through because they weren't, the big money Republican candidates. So I'd like to do kind of a grassroots, freedom candidate sort of thing, and, try to have more influence over the Republican Party.
There's a couple of candidates out there, I got to tell you, that would fall right in line with what you're describing. Like Amy Reichert could definitely use some help, especially with her background and why she got into the race is similar to your concern about, the COVID response. Laura Lothian in La Mesa is technically, she's in office now, but she just got voted in a special election, but she's another person we got to really work hard to stay in, because I think that she falls right in line with the values that you're describing, the folks that supported you. There are a lot of people that meet that criteria, John, that I think a lot of your folks would love to help. Assuming things don't go well with the rest of the count, they would love to jump into that race for sure.
Well, then I'm pretty sure every single one of my supporters is also supporting Amy Reichert, because Nathan Fletcher is not real popular in these circles.
Yeah, that guy's pretty horrible, man.
Yeah, I went to a couple of the Board of Supervisors meetings. I can't believe how politically sleazy he is.
Politically sleazy. That's exactly that needs to be a T-shirt right there. That's exactly what he is.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
So I went into one of the meetings where they redefined a woman as whoever identifies as one, and I went in there and explained the jail situation to where I'm not afraid of actual, people who think they're women and men who think they're women doing it. I'm afraid of the predator men using this ordinance to get into women's jails. And at the end, he basically accused anyone with this opinion he likened us to the people who didn't want, blacks to use the same restrooms. And it was just, I'm trying to warn him that people are going to take advantage of this and abuse women in our jails. And he ended up calling me a racist, which, pretty terrible.
Was there anybody, any candidates or elected or any political types that you met because of your campaign that you liked, other than Amy Reichert?
No, there's several of them. Josiah O'Neill was running for the 51st district, I think it was. He's just amazing. He's actually in law enforcement. I said, man, why weren't you running for sheriff? He's a great guy. And David Chittick was running in the, I think, 50th district. He's amazing, too. Cool. But, lots of them, actually.
Well, Jonathan Peck, thank you so much, man. I really, truly appreciate you stepping up and doing what you did. I think that you're a gentleman, a scholar, and a fine judge of scotch. So thank you so much, man. I'm going to talk to you real soon, okay?
Bye.
Hey, we live in a time where mainstream media and politicians are trying to eliminate your ability to defend yourself. Gun control laws just don't work. If laws against murder don't stop a criminal, is a magazine round limit really going to stop him? Well, making good people helpless doesn't make bad people harmless. Help us restore and defend the Second Amendment. Hit and like and subscribe the button and share the show with a friend.
All right, time for everybody's favorite segment, Stump My Nephew. Okay, this is, of course, if you send in a gun trivia question, and we use it on the air, we'll give you a hat or a shirt. If you stump my nephew, we'll give you a super cool special prize. This week's super cool special prize is gun prom tickets. Again, if you don't have tickets, you can buy your gun prom tickets at gunprom.com. It's this Saturday, so June 18th. So hurry up and buy. All right, you there, Sam?
Yeah, how are you guys?
Good, man. This is an interesting question. I don't think I'd put money. Usually, I'd put money on you, but I don't know if I'd put money on you for this one. This one's a little.
Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence.
I'll put money on him from this one. Hey.
Yeah.
Oh, if I knew it, I know he knows it.
All right.
I will too.
Yeah. All right. What do you want me to do? I got a quarter for Action Jackson, and even money, $1 with Joe. How about that?
Oh, there you go. I'll take that.
All right, you'll take it. You want any of this action, Dave?
I'll take 5.
5? I don't have that kind of money.
Oh, that's right. How about a spaghetti dinner at Denny's?
Even better.
All right.
They don't spare spaghetti. All right. Okay, let's just go for it. All right, Action Jackson, my friend, you ready to read the question?
Yep, I am.
Without further ado, go for it.
All right.
Who sent the question in first?
Gibson from Los Angeles asks, what's a dum-dum?
Gibson from Los Angeles. First of all, tough break. Hope you move out soon. Second, a dum-dum. That's a really fun question.
I think I just lost $1.25.
You may be aware of the provision in the Hague Pact of 1899 that you are not allowed, a military is not allowed to use expanding bullets in warfare. And so that's usually taken to mean hollow point rounds, which is why all your military handgun ammo is just FMJ. There have been different interpretations of it, but basically the idea is that it was considered cruel, unnecessarily cruel at the time, to use something like a hollow point or soft point bullet that would mushroom out and cause more devastating wounds. And the reason for that is because in colonial India, British soldiers had taken to creating what they called dum-dum bullets. Where the name comes from, I don't know, but the concept is that you would take your standard .303 British rifle round and use a knife to peel off the jacket from the front part of the bullet to create basically a soft point. Some people got more creative, some soldiers got more creative and started changing the shapes of the tips in an effort to get better expansion. But basically the point is soft point bullet expands in tissue. That's what a dum-dum bullet is.
Okay, so I just lost $1.25 in a spaghetti dinner.
Pretty much.
That was an expensive bet. Oh, my gosh. The name dum-dum was used to describe a British military bullet that was developed at the Dum-Dum Arsenal. There you go. on the northwest frontier of India in the late 1890s. It consisted of a jacketed .303 rifle bullet with the jacket nose open to expose its lead core. The aim was to improve the bullet's effectiveness by increasing its expansion upon impact. The phrase dum-dum was later expanded to include any soft-nosed or hollow-pointed bullet. The Hague Convention of 1899 outlawed the use of these bullets. While soldiers are required to fire bullets that have a full metal jacket, police are not. If hollow points hit a building, they will not ricochet, minimizing the risk of injuring other people nearby. You nailed it. I mean, just completely and totally obliterated that. I have no idea how you do this. How do you know that? Do you remember how you learned that?
Because he's no dum-dum.
There we go. All right, so do you remember how you know that?
No, I have no idea. Most of this stuff, it just sticks in there, and then you mention it in the question, and I go, oh, yeah.
Do you remember the dum-dum lollipops? You remember those? Do you think that's related? Nobody remembers?
I don't think those are related, but I'm not a candy historian, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask.
Well, I now kind of wonder if those dum-dum lollipops are .303 caliber. I wonder if they're like little takeoffs of the bullet.
They're quite a bit larger than .303 caliber, I would have to say.
Yeah, that's probably true. All right. Okay. Well, awesome job, man. How's everything going on in Virginia? What do you think about? Did you have a chance to take a look at what the Senate is considering, or I think they're just about to pass? As far as
yes, I saw the news headline just as I was getting ready to close the store because I had work today. Basically, my elevator pitch version of my reaction is we on the pro-gun side are always told that we need to compromise. But what compromise means is that each party gives up something in exchange for an outcome that favors both more. But the pro-gun side has been compromising in that we've been giving up parts of our right to keep and bear arms for longer than I've been alive, longer than anyone listening has been alive, yet we hardly ever receive anything in return. So I would like to see if anti-gun legislation is to be passed at the federal level, if that's already a foregone conclusion, I would at least like to see something in return, please, like deregulation of NFA items, national CCW reciprocity, all sorts of stuff like that. That seems to be, to use the phrase common sense, but we never really receive anything in return. For giving up our rights.
That would be compromise, which we don't do, or we don't have, I guess. It's interesting. You're in Virginia, right, Sam?
Yes.
Yeah, one of your you've got a real stellar guy out there too, a guy named Byer, I guess, who's a representative who's proposing 1,000% tax on ARs, and his scheme is he thinks he can get it through the House because they control the House. And because he's calling it, I think, a fee, he's saying that he can do it through reconciliation in the Senate. Therefore, they only need 50 votes, and then Kamala is 51. But 1,000% fee on that would make your $500 AR a $5,000 AR, or your $2,000 Daniel Defense AR a $20,000 AR, effectively a ban. So interesting people out there with proposals.
Yeah, unfortunately. As I always like to say, a lot of the people writing the anti-gun legislation really don't understand what they're legislating. So the analogy I use is it's like if the Department of Motor Vehicles was run by the Amish. They have no vested interest in the subject matter and no real technical knowledge on it either.
Yeah, and it makes more sense when you think about what they're really doing, because I'm sure that guy has no interest at all in public safety or reduced crime or anything. He's trying to disarm people, and that's a good way to do it. If you can make your your gun cost $20,000, that's a good way to disarm people.
Well, I think really there are sort of there are infinitely many two types of people, but there are two types of anti-gun people. There is the group I think and I hope is in the majority of them who really aren't very familiar with the topic and just sort of think about it at a surface level. without really having all the facts and without taking the time to seriously consider certain aspects of that issue that are far too complicated for me to address in such a short segment, and I think just need to be educated and maybe would change their tune a little bit. And then there's the much more influential minority, I think, many of them in politics, who are just categorically anti-gun and shroud it in sort of the aesthetics of public safety and pay lip service to the idea of saving lives, whereas their real goal is essentially to consolidate their own power.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% on that take. I think that's exactly right.
You're right. The other thing is that, you know, somehow this word compromise worked its way into politics, and I don't think our system of government was actually ever designed for compromise. I think it was designed for consensus. There's an extremely important difference. I don't think we should ever compromise, but I do think that we should talk about consensus. And in this situation, the consensus is that mentally ill people need more help. And we need to figure out how to get them more help, and we need to figure out how to educate people so that they can get them more help. And you know, another one I think that we're pretty close to consensus on is, you know, school security. Maybe not on the details, but at least the fact that, hey, schools need to be secure. But I would like to see more gun advocates and more political advocates talk less about compromise and more about consensus.
Well, again, but a way to look at that too is you compromise on policy, you don't compromise on principle. And, you know, the compromise thing works if both sides are trying to achieve the same thing. They just have different ideas about how to get there. And we don't have that today.
Well, and if what you're trying to achieve is ban guns, then you're never going to, you know what I mean? We're never, ever going to get there. Thank you so much, Sam. Awesome job. Extremely good commentary at the end there. And I can't believe you knew what a dum-dum was. But, you know, look at the family line you come from. Of course you know what a dum-dum is. I don't know what that means. I don't know where we're going with that. Anyway, thanks a lot for calling, Sam.
Thanks for having me on. Keep writing in the questions. Everyone, thanks for listening.
All right. Well, hey, folks, subscribe to our show and give us a 5-star review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. And do us a favor, support all our great sponsors, San Diego County, Orange County, Inland Empire Gun Owners, the Dillon Law Group, PRMI Mortgage, Sage Tree Digital Marketing, Seal One, Leo Hamill Fine Jewelry, San Diego Flight Training International. Thanks to Joe Drammissi, Michael Schwartz, Sam the Gunman, Action Jackson, and Brendan Thomas. And don't touch that dial. The man is coming up next right here, Mr. Siegel, right here on Gun Owners Radio, FM 96.1 AM 1170.
The answer.